If you're a speech language pathologist looking to niche down and grow a thriving private practice, this episode is for you. Today I'm joined by Autumn Henning. Autumn is a speech language pathologist, certified orofacial myologist, and international board certified lactation consultant. She's the owner of Chrysalis Orofacial in Greenville, South Carolina, where she specializes in orofacial function and development across the lifespan. Through her practice, she's trained thousands of professionals in continuing education courses and offers business consulting services. Autumn is also a speaker, author, and guest on numerous podcasts, contributing to her expertise in the field. She holds a faculty appointment at the University of Kentucky College of Health Sciences. Outside of work, she enjoys traveling, reading, and spending time with her family in South Carolina. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you guys for having me and for that lovely introduction. Happy to be here. I think Vanita and I have gone back and forth and finally made this happen.
Yeah, so happy you can be here. So does that cover everything, or is there anything else you'd like to add before we get into the interview?
I think mostly, yeah, that kind of sums it up.
All right,
Try to
awesome.
keep it short.
So many SLPs struggle with finding their niche, but you seem to have done this very successfully. So how did you decide to specialize in orofacial myology?
Yeah, so let's see. Long story short, in grad school, I thought I was going to do adults with like TBI and trauma. I love like cognitive therapy. And when I got out of school, there wasn't really that job available where I was. And so I ended up working at a pediatric feeding clinic. I really like the intersection. The reason I did speech pathology is the intersection of educational and medical. And so I worked at a pediatric feeding clinic, one of the premier ones in the nation. So we did intensive feeding. And when I found out that I really like mechanics, I like how things move and go together and coordinate and synchronize in grad school when we were learning about embryology and swallowing and how all of these things have to come together to make it work and help us function. So I really enjoyed like that oral function aspect. And so I was working with these children and noticed that, the parents also had some dysfunction, whether it was like TMJ or sleep apnea or tongue thrust, open bite, things like that, and really found that the movements of the mouth and face affect feeding, swallowing, speech, TMJ, sleep apnea, all the stuff I was talking about. And so I did actually create a proposal. This was like my first year out for the hospital that I was working at in that feeding program to get trained in orofacial myology, and it was denied. So I knew I wanted to look at it early on. And I really wanted to fill a gap in my community because we are the first dedicated myofunctional therapy based clinic in the region over here. So, yeah, we treat infants at birth as far as breastfeeding, bottle feeding, all the way up to older individuals with sleep apnea, TMJ, things like that. So we end up treating entire families, and I really like that. And I really like getting to know patients and seeing from start to finish and seeing that transformation and troubleshooting and taking them through that. So that is really how I got into this specialty. And I think when you do find it, you just know. Sort of like marriage. When you find your person, you just know.
I wanted to chime in here. I noticed that you're also an IBCLC. That is not an easy certification to get. So, what was that process like, and what made you decide that you wanted to also pursue that? What was the benefit that you saw?
Good question. So, a few reasons. Like I said, I love function. I love the mechanics and the sequencing of everything and how the muscles work together. And so from my standpoint, grad school was 15 years ago for me. Um, So we really didn't get much on infant feeding. And if it was bottle feeding and like in the NICU, medically fragile. And even then, not a lot. So I was outpatient, private practice and outpatient hospital setting, seeing these infants. And, the mechanics for breastfeeding are different than bottle feeding, and you have two patients in a sense. And so I knew a lot about the infant side, but not a lot about the maternal side. And so yeah, I called being an SLP, a certified orofacial myologist, and a lactation consultant. That I call it the oral function trifecta.
Yeah.
And so that was my goal, to give good care from beginning to the elderly. And so, yeah, I was actually the first one in the world to do that, which is my little claim to fame, which is cool. So, yeah, just kind of getting more of a holistic whole picture. The process, I think it depends on what your work setting and experience is. So, as an SLP, I qualified for Pathway 1. So it means that you already have a degree in a relevant healthcare setting. And so you have to have 1,000 hours of caring for moms and babies for breastfeeding, which was easy for me to do. I was doing that in, my practice, and on a given week, several hours. So that's over 5 years. It has to be within 5 years. And then I'm a CEU lover. So you had to have 95 hours of lactation specific continuing education. And then you just pay your money and you take the test. So I will say the test was tough because a couple reasons. You have to think globally because it's international, and different countries have access to different things, and different diseases are more prevalent in different countries, and all of that. And then you also have to think if your sole profession is lactation consultant. So I have that extra scope of practice as a SLP and a SLP first, but I had to like push that out because the exam is only your lactation abilities. So that was what was tough. Yeah, but there we are. I just recertified. I'm in my 5th year. So, yeah.
That's really cool. Thank you for sharing that. I didn't realize you could do pathway 1 for the IBCLC, but it makes sense if you're already like seeing those clients, then you could get those hours in. So you were seeing them for orofacial myology at the time.
Well, like infant feeding.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. You
That
got it.
doesn't matter at that point because it's not like, oh, you were a certified lactation consultant, I'm assuming, before you became an IBCLC. Is that how that works?
No. So as a SLP, we do have working with breastfeeding in our scope of practice.
Oh, okay. I didn't know
So
that. Mhm.
yeah, yeah. It's feeding, it's swallowing. Yep.
Okay.
And it's just an added. And our ASHA practice portal basically says like you need to be ethical. Don't do things that you don't have training in. So I
Right.
did go further with like CEUs and get training.
Got
Um,
it.
so yeah, yes, that's kind of how that went down.
So it seems like you were able to see kind of a gap in the market and were able to kind of fill that to niche down. If somebody else was trying to do something similar, what advice would you give them to try to either find a gap in the market or find out what they really love to do to choose that specialty?
Yeah, I think finding the gap in the market. So I don't know if I explained this in my bio, but I was employed first, and my Chrysalis Orofacial started as a side hustle. So we were looking at our finances and we're like, we cannot retire on this salary, right? So, anyhow, with that, I really was on the front end of tongue ties. I had a case back in 2010 that really like rocked my world and made me question everything that I thought I knew. And so I read up on everything I could. There weren't a ton of resources out there at that time. And I created a model of care. So tons of therapists were calling and being like, "Hey, what's this tongue tie thing?" And hey, it's not a 20-minute conversation. So what I did was I looked at practice patterns, what was working with patients and helping. Practice is kind of practice, trial and error. And in some sense, you have to see what's working. And so with those patterns, I created that model of care, basically word vomited into a notebook. And from there, I created a 2-day continuing ed course. And so I kind of built up my reputation, if you will, or people knowing who I am through that. So I'm in my 9th year of teaching that course, and it's just grown and grown and grown. So yeah, that was starting side hustle. And then when I went out on my own, as far as our private practice, a few years later, just when I realized I wanted to practice the way that I wanted and the way that I was seeing was needed, as far as not having certain time restrictions or, a lot of the red tape, right? And that is part of why we went into private practice. So me and my husband both quit our jobs and went all in 2020, actually. So that was fun. But we did it. It's kept growing. He's our COO, and I'm technically the CEO, so we can be woman owned. So yeah, that's kind of the evolution of how I got into that. As far as niching down, I think just exposing yourself to a variety of things. And the one big thing that I would say to SLPs, stop taking only SLP CEUs. Like when I go to CEUs now, I have dentists next to me, I have OTs next to me, I have lactation consultants. I think, and that's the cool thing about my courses. We have so many disciplines and we learn so much from each other. So really that, collaborative interprofessional education can really spark an idea or a joy in your heart about treating a certain population. And yeah, I think that's probably one of the best things. Second thing I would say is networking, the power of the relationship. So building those relationships with community members to refer to you. And it's not dropping off brochures. And I can tell you that because they don't know you, they don't know your expertise, no one's reading that. It is making a true connection, calling that doctor's office or whatever. Hey, I'm Autumn Henning. I'm talking to their practice manager or leaving a message with their nurse typically. I have a mutual patient with Dr. So-and-so, wanted to get in touch with him. Here is my personal cell phone. And then once you get them on the phone, hey, let's go grab coffee and talk through how we could work together with patients and think about how you can help them. All right. So it's not just a one way, send me referrals, send me referrals. And so through this, we have cultivated 42 regular referral sources, which is
Wow.
huge. At least we look at it every end of year. So, and then we have others that are more sporadic. So, I think that's super powerful in having a very niche private practice. And then, a lot of word of mouth, like when you help someone and you help them overcome something and you go through that journey with them, they tell their neighbors, they tell their friends, they, write you great Google reviews. So, yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. So would you say cultivating those relationships is really how you started getting your client base when you first started, or were there
Yeah.
other strategies you also implemented when you were first trying to get clients?
So I had worked in the community 5 years at that point. So even when I was employed, because I wanted to give good care, I was reaching out and calling these doctors and dentists and, other healthcare members. And so they already knew me and knew my name. So when I was going out on my own, and it was really cool because it wasn't like some negative breakup or like conflict of interest. Like I was the only one in that practice that did what I did, that niche area. And I wanted to work with adults, and it was only a pediatric practice. So it was a good like transition, you know what I mean? And ethical and whatnot. But yeah, like I already had a lot of relationships. So when I went out on my own, I texted, called that doctor, emailed them, whatever, like, hey, like, I've moved. This is my vision. This is, I want to continue working together. Another thing I will say, make it easy to refer. If it is hard to refer to you, they're not going to do it. So, we have fax, we have email, encrypted email, of course, and we have a like check sheet form, who the patient is, who the referral's from, and it has like all the services and things that we treat, and they just check mark. And so, and then sometimes they'll send their clinical notes and stuff. So I find that helpful in referrals, make it easy. However, yep, yes. Other things, getting people to come, you have to be legit. For me, when I go to a doctor or provider, first thing I do is look up their website. I look at their picture, look at their bio. If you don't have a website, makes me question like how legit this business is, to be honest. People want to fear of the unknown is the worst, right? They don't know who they're going to. They haven't seen their face, they don't know their credentials. And so having that accessible on a website, and I realize like starting up, there's only so much money, but you can totally DIY. I did my own website. Now, in hindsight, I wish I would have paid for it because it took forever. But, that's the reality of startups. And you can make a very basic website. I know some EMRs offer websites. Yeah. So those are some of my tips.
That's awesome. How did you kind of choose your name and branding to align with being a niche private practice?
I absolutely love this question. I'm a big person about like meaning behind things and signs that you're like on the right path and where you're, supposed to be in life. And we got a check from my grandmother for $5,000, and that's how we started our practice. And she sent the check in this folded up paper that had the story of the butterfly. And I've always loved butterflies. My room as a kid was like decorated in butterflies. So anyway, the story was about basically a man saw a cocoon and a butterfly trying to get out, and he cut open the cocoon so the butterfly could get out, and he thought he was helping, but the butterfly never flew because it didn't do the work and, stretch its wings and muscles to get out. And that's honestly the way that I practice is I can't do the work for you. You have to do it. You have to go home and do your homework. You have to engage. You have to attend the session. I can't do it for you. Otherwise, you're not going to get the results that you're after. And I always love like the idea of butterfly and the transformation and, coming out on the other side of that. So that's kind of where that came from. And, yeah, it's hard to spell, so maybe not the best choice, but it was right for me. And then our logo actually has faces in the butterfly wings, which a lot of people don't even see. But yeah, I think it's such a good reminder. I like to say, like, you can't want it more than they do. And if I'm working harder on someone else's health than they are, that's a problem. And that's another reason, one of the many that we did private pay. People are invested in it. And, yeah.
Wow, what a special story. I feel like you're one of the only people that we've spoken to so far that has like such a strong purpose and meaning behind your branding. Like, would you agree, Nicole?
Yeah, absolutely. That was a really beautiful
I was like,
story.
that's
Oh,
good.
good.
And I feel like I could see that being like a constant reminder all the time throughout your practice. Like, I want to go back to our meaning and purpose, Nicole, and I'm sure we're on that kind of track. I mean, that it just shows that you're really doing what you're meant to be doing and their passion that comes through. I mean, that is the best elevator pitch I've ever heard.
Oh, nice. I also think like it goes along with business too. Like I call it the messy middle. Like when you're trying to grow, sometimes you feel like you're in darkness and you don't know how to push forward and get out. And so that's kind of like the cocoon and the transformation and then flying. So there's phases in business, you know this, where you have to like change and evolve and try something different. And I always say entrepreneurship is exhilaratingly terrifying. Like there's such highs and then there's nerves and, you know, anxieties and things like that. So it fits with both that clinical mission and side and also the business side.
Love it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. You mentioned before that you created your own course pretty early on. So can you tell us a little bit about how you've built different revenue streams or what advice you would give to other SLPs who are looking to go beyond just one-on-one therapy?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. You know, I literally had never created a course and I did it on literally Facebook groups. Hey, anyone interested in a tongue tie course? Put your email and I'll email you about it. And I did like the whole BCC. I didn't know anything about email lists or marketing or any of that. So, anyhow, yeah, diversifying revenue is always great because, you know, there are ups and downs and ebbs and flows in business. And, you know, things like inflation impact people's ability to pay their rent and buy food, much less do a therapy that is not like absolutely necessary for them to live. You know what I mean? So diversifying that. Other things that I do speaking. So I have presented and spoke at lots of big conferences and not only in the SLP world, a lot of them have been in the dental world as well and the OT and PT world. So, yes, speaking can be a good way. Courses are a great way. Potentially, you know, I know a lot of people are doing like digital resources and, you know, therapy handouts and templates and things like that. So, that can be good. I haven't really done much of that yet. It's on the docket. You just can't do everything all at once and all at the same time. Other revenue sources, consulting. So I do consulting with other clinicians, both on business and clinical topics. And it's really fun. Like I said, I really like getting to know somebody and having that ongoing relationship. I probably do consulting different than a lot of other people. I don't do packages. So, for a variety of reasons. Number one, I want people to invest in sessions because they got something out of it, right? And they pay for their next session. Number two, it takes time for people to implement things that you've given them. So, like, if you have a package of like, oh, 4 consulting sessions in a month, like that may not be necessary. Another reason is I don't want to track how many sessions you've done, to be honest. So, yeah, consulting, both business and clinical. Done some corporate consulting too. Yeah, and people call it all kinds of things. They call it mentoring or coaching. I haven't done anything with like parents or the general public. I just find it hard to not be therapeutic, you know, and you can only operate in your state where you have your license. So it would just be like education if I did that. And I think I'd have to stick my foot in my mouth a lot because I'd want to like give them all these therapeutic recommendations. So I just don't do that right now. I mean, in the future, if I can, you know, tweak that to figure out how to hold myself back. But yeah, I think diversifying revenue streams is really important and having more than one referral source. And you have to keep those relationships alive. You can't be like, oh, they're sending me lots of referrals. Guess what? I never have to talk to them again. No, Yeah, you gotta water those seeds.
Can you give us some examples about how you develop or keep those relationships alive and keep in contact?
Yeah, yeah. I think just giving them updates about a certain patient or reaching out, saying happy birthday, like basic stuff. Yeah, going to observe at their office or inviting them to come over. Sometimes we'll, bring a little treat over. Here's some cookies. Thank you for working with us or whatever. Something nominal. And yeah, I think those are the best ways, and doing direct referrals. Because if you just give someone a piece of paper and say, "Oh, go call them," then their office doesn't know who sent them. So direct referrals, when you send the referral to their office for your patient with your clinical notes, they see what you do, they see your value, they can track where their referrals are coming, and they can see how collaborative you are. Inviting them, if you have a conference that you're going to, that would be appropriate for their discipline too. "Hey, I'm headed to this, you want to come?" Or new research that you found. "Hey, I read this article. This was really cool. Let me know what you think." Just like those conversation starters, and probably 1 to 2 times a year, we'll like meet up and go have coffee or, something like that, just to like reconvene and, hey, what can we do better? You know, what were the cool cases this year? And something like orofacial myology is really cool because there's visible results. So, like, for example, our orthodontist, like, we can have a picture of what their teeth looked like before. Now we get the tongue in the right spot, not sitting between the teeth or pushing. And guess what? That bite closes. And so another way to like I said, make it valuable for them. So it's going to take a shorter amount of time if we get the muscles working with the orthodontics, and it's going to be stable because when you take everything off, if things are out of balance, things relapse. So that's a pain to the orthodontist. They're like, "Oh my God, this case is taking forever. It's stalling out. I know this is a house of cards, and they're going to be mad at me if their teeth don't stay, even if they're wearing their retainer." Muscle always trumps function, always trumps structure. So, like I said, like, yeah, multiple ways of making it helpful and beneficial for them too.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing those. I feel like we hear a lot about networking and trying to keep those relationships alive over time, but it can be harder to think about how to feasibly do it and how to keep those relationships going throughout the years. So you're not just like
Right.
popping in and out of this person's life every now and then.
Yes.
So thank you for
Yeah.
sharing those.
And I feel
Is
like,
there,
yeah,
yes,
people
go
say
ahead.
networking and you're like, okay, but what does that actually tangibly mean?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's another course that we did because that is one of the top questions we get in our clinical courses is like, well, this sounds all great and fine if you have a
Mhm.
collaborative team, but if you don't, like, how do you get there? And so we did like a mini, an hour and a half little course that like goes through the steps that we took and gives examples and, all of that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. Is there any other tools or resources that you would want to share with the SLPs who are listening or other practices?
Yeah. I think, let's see, obviously courses, and not just mine, from other, entities as well. If this is like your passion and you're enjoying places to learn more, even if it's not, as a SLP, you likely have clients on your caseload that are affected by these things. So knowing when and where to refer is really good. If you're like dipping your toe in to myofunctional therapy, have a really mini course that's like, is myo right for me? And it takes clinicians through like, hey, how to really determine if this is what you want to do, and how you could start like implementing some of the principles and strategies in your existing speech clientele, basic signs and symptoms. And then if they wanted to further their education, some ways to do that and some organizations to look into. Those are good.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So, do you have an Instagram, a website that you can share? Where can people connect with you?
Yeah, probably the best place is Instagram. It's our handle is at Chrysalis Orofacial 1. And we put results on there, like before and afters of patients. We will comment on things in the media as far as myofunctional therapy, our courses. We talk about those on there. Business ownership, put it all out there too. Yeah. Yeah, lots of just general education as well. So, yeah. And I'm nice. So, like, feel free to send me a DM. So
Thank you. That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming. And we really appreciated all of your insights on how you grew your private practice and all the action items that you really gave all of our listeners on how they can cultivate relationships with other practices and build their private practice from there. So, thank you so much.
thank you guys. I loved this conversation.
Thank you.
If you found this episode helpful, share it with another SLP who's looking to grow their practice. And if you're enjoying the show, make sure you subscribe and leave a quick review. It really helps more people find these conversations. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next episode.